Oh, thank you very much. I'm not sure it's an honor to be the first one up after lunch, but it is an honor to be here. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, Salam Aleichem. I wanted to comment, Dr. Prager said that this was a fortuitous day for us to get together because it is the day that Abraham was called. I was actually thinking that there would be an even better day, which is in 2 weeks, when we read in the Torah about Ishmael and Isaac coming together to bury their father Abraham. I carry this vision, and this is the Hebrew month of Cheshvan, and Cheshvan carries the distinction of being the only Jewish month without a holiday. And my dream is that on the day that we read that, we will come together to bury all of the unresolved grief that keeps us fighting with each other. So I begin with these words of prayer. Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha. It says, spread over us a sukkah, a tent of peace. My work today is kind of a creative excursus based on some texts, both ancient and one modern. I want to put aside today's controversies and with prayers for our interfaith efforts to reclaim religion for justice, healing, and peace, return to what I think is the core of universal spiritual practice, and to the mountain in Jerusalem that is sacred to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. We call it the Temple Mount. You call it Haram al-Sharif. And if we could have that slide, please. Yes. So, based on my work with Skirball Hospice as a bereavement chaplain, I'm going to present a new mourner's path for healing with roots on that mountain at a time before we split into different faith traditions. I'm going to use biblical metaphors and holy Hebrew words to reconfigure the psychological model which has evolved from work that was originally done by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, although many have built on her work, but she did her work with dying people. And I'm going to give holy names to the steps of the liminal experience. I posit these transitions as holy. It was mentioned today about how at one point, following all of the tragedies that began early in the 20th century, there was a move toward denying death, toward secularizing death, toward not speaking about death. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, although some of her work has been built on by others, really forced us to begin having the conversations again. And I want to continue that conversation. So three Hebrew texts underline my work. The first is a line from Psalm 30, and it's attributed in the Bible to King David, and it is said that he wrote it with the vision that it would be recited on the day that the temple was dedicated. And it says, "You shall turn my mourning into dancing." So what I get from that, and also from his son Solomon's dedication of the temple, where he said from the beginning, Solomon built the temple only on this condition: if anyone is in distress, let him come here and pray. So this is from Smachot. It is a minor tractate of the Talmud. It was written in Palestine and finished in the 8th century. It further describes what it meant to turn mourning into dancing. And I'll say a little bit more about it. But first, let's look at the term mourning into dancing, because it doesn't mean what it sounds like in English. In Hebrew, the word for dancing is machol. In Hebrew, there are 11 words in the Torah for dancing. And they're all translated into English as dance. And this word, machol, is a circular ritual dance of healing that was often done by women. And so we have a sense that people came to the temple to participate in this ritual of healing. And they could have used that word, or they could have used the word chagag, which is another word for a round circle processional dance. And it's a word that we, in Hebrew, is related to chag, which we use for festival or pilgrimage festival. And of course, it also is the same word in Arabic, hajj, a pilgrimage processional. So, Smachot, which I described as a minor tractate of the Torah, has the Talmud, has this statement: a mourner who enters the Temple Mount may enter and walk around to the left. They would say to him, "May the one who dwells in this house comfort you." And then they ask, who are those who circled to the left? Who are those who walked what was referred to as the mourner's path? A mourner, an excommunicant, one who has someone sick at home, and one concerned about a lost object. So in today's terms, the ones who circle to the left might include almost everybody in the community. Those walking the mourner's path of antiquity included those who faced economic reverses, relocation, change in social status, and illness, implying that each experience of profound change required attention similar to that given mourners. So when I speak of mourners, I include all of those on these all these threshold moments in their lives where things are changed, and don't limit it just to death. So the third text that I want to speak about is Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. It says, how good are your tents, Jacob, your holy dwelling places, Israel. So here we have, this is a prayer that was a blessing that came from a Moabite priest, a sorcerer who was called upon to curse Jacob's family as they came in their tents through the desert. And instead of, every time he tried to curse them, it came out as a blessing. And in this phrase, the name of Jacob is turned to Yisrael, which is the name that he got after encountering God. And his tent, his simple tent, becomes a mishkan. A mishkan is a dwelling place for God. So what I want to do is look at the possibility that the stages of grief that we have come to understand, that were given to us by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and those who followed, which were lacking really in a spiritual dimension, really are places where people come to explore some of the most important experiences in life, and to have their life changed in such a way that they may enter with no sense of purpose, with a sense that God has forsaken them because they're in such a difficult space, and that they come to the end of it with a sense that God is in this place and they did not know. Another line from the Torah. People who mourn often feel that the God that sustained them in the past has abandoned them. And the previous answers to life's profound questions may not work anymore. Our people who are facing illness also have this same experience. And we're given the Kubler-Ross path, and it's become misused in many ways. It's become very prescriptive. linear, none of the things that she really intended it to be, but people begin to feel, oh, it's 10 minutes, why am I not angry? They begin to think that that it's supposed to be just one way, instead of really the richness. And they begin to describe their experience or look to this outer description of their experience instead of their inner experience to define this transformative time in their life. So what I have done is to try to rename each of the stages of grief, giving them holy Hebrew names, holy names that indicate both that they're not just mourning a situation, their health, the loss of a person. They're also mourning their existential understanding of what it means to be human. And that each of these stages of grief is an important holding place where they have the opportunity to come to terms with what it means to be alive. And so I have renamed them as Sukkot. A sukkah is the place that we are commanded to live for 7 days during the fall. It's a holiday, it's a harvest holiday, and it's a holiday where we're living in these temporary little huts, these Sukkot, and it's also called Zman Simchatenu, the time to be happy. So here we are, living in these fragile huts, and we are commanded to be happy. To me, this is the ultimate spiritual teaching. It says life is vulnerable, we are vulnerable, everything is temporary, be happy. Incredible challenge, but I think at the core of what spirituality tries to teach us. So we're going to go into these Sukkot, and we're going to use them the sukkah as a central metaphor for exploring these stages of change, giving them holy, holy Hebrew names so that people will know that, yes, I'm commanded to go into this place, and it's temporary, because this is just 7 days that we have to live in these things. So if people know that it's holy and it's temporary, perhaps it'll be a little less frightening to them when they have to face these Sukkot. So let's go to the next slide. So Jews will recognize this. This looks like the place that mourners go after the funeral. It's a house of Shiva, where people sit, and they are brought food, and they're taken care of by the community. Kubler-Ross's first stage that she describes, she calls denial. Denial, not such a great word. People know what happened, but they can't take it in. It's too, how could my life change so profoundly in such a short time? So they are shocked. They are in awe, but in Hebrew, the word for awe also can mean both radical amazement, but it can also mean horror. So it's this sort of tenuous place that we stand when something has come upon us and we quite don't know what to make of it. So in this sukkah, which is the first stage of grief according to Kubler-Ross, we sit and we wonder, and we try to think what on earth has happened. And we feel alienated, even though there may be people all around us. But one of the things that is done in a house of Shiva is that people bring food. And among the foods that they're commanded to bring are things like hard-boiled eggs, bagels, lentils, round things. And they say, why do you bring a round thing to the house of Shiva? And it's because mourners don't have a mouth. And just like a pea or a lentil, the mourner does not have a mouth. And so the work of grief is to come to terms with literally come to terms and to find their ability to speak. Grief is a wilderness. And the words in Hebrew for wilderness and the word for speak are the same. And so the sense of going into the wilderness to be able to find words, there's a wonderful connection to them, and it was in the wilderness that the Torah was given. So you go into this place which is so confusing, this place of irah. This is the Hebrew word, irah. And you sit in silence, hoping that at some point you can begin to be able to express yourself. So next slide. So this is a word we've heard earlier today. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called this this stage of grief depression, and I really take issue with that. Grief is not an illness. Depression is an illness. And mourning is hard enough. Why do people have to think that there's something wrong with them, that they're ill? So kavod means, we used it in terms of kavod habriot earlier, which is dignity. But kavod usually is translated as honor. It also means weight, and it can also mean glory, and and heaviness. So here we are. Right at the community is not around quite as much, and we retreat. Mourners retreat to their place of solitude, and they sit hopefully on a comfortable chair, and you can see. Oh, I forgot to tell you, this is all doll furniture. This little tissue box is about the size of the nail on my pinky finger. This is a place of tears. It's a place of sadness, appropriate sadness, not depression. And here it is that people sit and they wait. They wait. And, everyone in the greater culture is begging them, come on, get back to work, get going again. But the organism is saying, I can't move, I feel heavy, I can't go on. And the organism is saying, you've got to honor what's lost. You have to honor the process of letting go. You have to grapple with what it means to be an organism on a planet where people die, where living things die. And so you sit and you cry, and when you cry, you soften the stone in your heart. But these stones are not just stones in the heart, because in the Torah, there's a story where Moses pleads with God and says, please, let me see your kavod. Let me see the physical, some sense of you where I can really experience your tangibility. And God says, well, you can't do that exactly, but I'm going to walk by and you'll see what's in my wake. And what's in God's wake are the attributes of rachamim. We have the same word in Hebrew and in Arabic for compassion. So here's Moses behind, and the people in this tent are waiting. They're waiting, just like Moses was pleading. They're waiting for some sense of compassion to wash over them so that they can begin to move. And and very often a lot of it comes through crying, through the tears that people are really almost obligated to shed. So next slide. So what I like to say to people, and you'll understand why a little bit later, is that when you leave any of these Sukkot, when you come through this and you feel like you're ready to move out, you get a pearl. There's a story in the legends of the Jews that says that Abraham wore a pearl necklace. He wore a pearl around his neck, and whenever anyone looked at that pearl, that person was healed. So here they have a little pearl, and so they begin to collect them. So move to the next, I think it's not the next slide, but the slide after. So this is all of these words, to use them, it's quite audacious to choose these words. But this is what she might call anger. But I do this very audacious thing, which I call it kadosh. Kadosh means holy. And what I want to do is affirm the anger that mourners feel, not as something bad, but as life energy finally beginning to come, finally beginning to pierce the heaviness of the previous sukkah. And here we have the fire, we have a sense of the sacrifices in the temple that were made, that people brought to the temple so that they could align themselves with holiness. I also have a bicycle there because in my treatment office, from time to time, I bring in a stationary bike. When people can't find their anger, I get them on the bike and get them moving so that they can find some life energy. And there's also a little fire extinguisher there because people need to learn to discern between dangerous fire, dangerous anger, and anger that is really in the service of life. Kadosh also means separate. And when people get angry, they begin to define their boundaries. And so they begin to say, this is not acceptable. This is who I am. And they also come to terms with whatever the situation was before, they are separate from it. They're in a new place. And they can begin to feel the integrity of their individual experience. And it comes at first by saying what their boundaries are and articulating their boundaries. All right, next sukkah. So the next sukkah is Yisrael. I chose that because, as I referred to earlier, Yisrael was the name that was given to Jacob after he wrestled with this mysterious being, which was perhaps an angel, perhaps God's self. And he was given the name Yisrael, which, as I said before, has the name El, has the name God inside of it. This is the attempt, it's sort of related to her description of bargaining. And what we're really trying to do when we're in this sukkah is to find some sort of connection with life again, to find some connection perhaps with God. And I'm going to read you something that I wrote about my own experience in this sukkah. In the years after the deaths of my mother and sister, I became a gardener. I learned about organic soil improvement and made an elaborate chart of companion plants, which, when planted close together, protected each other against garden pests. I concocted natural pesticides from mixtures of garlic, vinegar, and Tabasco, which left a residue on my vegetables so strong that I could harvest a salad that was already dressed. Radishes are among the first seeds I put in the ground, an early warning system guaranteed to sprout within the week. I remember the anxiety which followed my sowing those seeds. Nervously, I counted the days with little faith that I would see life coming out of the ground. My friends, native to the rural area to which I had escaped in a vain effort to run away from my history, laughed at my lack of faith. They didn't understand that my anxiety over the birth of these radishes reflected my shattered faith in the life process as the result of the deaths of my mother and sister. Planting vegetables had been a bold step back into the river of life. That summer, I harvested much of my menu from my own garden, and from that I learned that life continues, even in the face of death. It was still possible to find partnership with the forces of life. Like Jacob, I had bargained with life and prevailed. I left Sukkot Yisrael with a renewed sense of partnership with God. So gardening is sort of a symbolic here of that attempt. I mean, gardening is our efforts and the absolute miracle that pulses through the universe. And so by gardening, I really did find that connection again. So imagine We've come through all of these Sukkot. We've collected a bunch of pearls, and now we move to the final Sukkah. And I've given it the name, two names actually. One is Yehudah, which is the name of Judah, just like the name Israel. Judah is also the name that speaks of the Jewish people. Judah was kind of started off as kind of a dubious character, not such a great guy, but he really was representative of transition. He became quite as we say in Yiddish, a mensch, a good guy, when he finally stood up to Joseph later in the biblical story. And there were other things that he did which really showed that instead of being the kind of conniving guy he was in the beginning, he became someone who was really a good man. So here we are in the final stage. It's also named Yirah. It's the higher awe as opposed to the lower awe that was the experience in the first Sukkah. But in this place, it's radical amazement. It's wonder. It's that feeling of how on earth did I walk this place? How did I get through this? I'm beginning to embrace life again. It's a miracle. And someone has collected, you get these pearls. Here you are sometimes in the depth of grief, and a bird flies, and it's a gorgeous bird, and you catch yourself, and you're just delighted. Or you see a baby, and you're just so happy, and then you remember you're in grief, and you go back to your grief, but each time you get a pearl. And so all of a sudden you see that you have a whole necklace, and that by some miracle you have come through your grief. It doesn't mean that you won't have to make a pilgrimage again and visit some of the issues that were in the relationship, in the situation, perhaps a recurrence of something, but it's a miracle. And so the person who is mourning or was mourning says, God was in this place, and I did not know. So these are the renewal of mourning, seeing it not just as a medical path, not just as a psychological path, not prescriptive, but actually each stage of grief as a holy holding place where we're commanded to live, but for a temporary period of time, and where there are essential things that we need to know if we're going to be human on this planet. So thank you.